So I'm just going to kind of run through these and I can take a few questions at the end. I do have a lot of slides, so buckle up. Um, and you can welcome to put, chat in the chat box or ask questions for later. But I'll probably just kind of plow through it for now. Okay, so this is also just a presentation for learning, for information, not as your medical provider. And this is me. I think most of you guys are probably familiar with me, but if not, my name is Bridgit Danner, and I started my um, career in health as an acupuncturist 20 years ago, which is crazy. I ran a wellness center in Portland, Oregon, that a few of you guys know for 10 years. I worked there for 13 years, and now I've been living in Arizona and working exclusively online for like 7 years, I guess. Um, I've done a lot of treatments, and I never expected to be specializing in mold, but as many of you have experienced, like it's a very intense thing to go through. And once I had learned so much about it, I really wanted to specialize in it more. So this is our coach Micki, who's also part of our team and the co-presenter of our toxic mold trained program. And I think we two are a really nice balance of personalities and specialties. We've trained with different practitioners. Micki has great information on the home and like EMF and air quality and stuff like that. I try to make sure in the program that you are developing your skills as a clinician and kind of walking, through the process of evaluating a person correctly, that type of thing. So I was realizing the other day that I moved into this house that's pictured here uh, 16, 17 years ago in Oregon. So I don't know if I was exposed to mold at other times in my life, but definitely in this house I was. Well, I do remember one other time for sure, actually, but definitely this house was full of mold. But I did not know that for about 8 years. And I was getting sicker and sicker and, cleanest diet ever, trying to do everything right, going to practitioners, not really getting better, getting sick often. Um, and then at the kind of end of this story in this house, I started working from home because I wanted to start working online. And of course, that's when I got even sicker because now I'm in the home all the time. So it took quite a long time for mold to be realized. And one of the myths is one I believed, which was mold is really rare. Mold is not very rare, unfortunately. So if you don't consider it, you could be missing, a major cause of your health issues. So, as I mentioned, I never knew I was going to specialize in mold, but I really was drawn to it. And why Micki and I created this course was to just spread awareness, create more mold practitioners. So I want to just talk about kind of the urgency and some of the issues in this space. So just briefly, what is mold? There's many types of mold, many species of mold. 12 or maybe it's about 15 species are toxic to mammals. But even a non-toxic mold could create some health issues if there's just a lot of it, if it's mixed with other elements in the home, if it's allergenic. And I'm going to use the word home, but you can also be exposed at work, in your car, in your RV, in your boat. I've kind of seen it all. So, another myth I probably could have added was that, mold is coming from food. Well, can be molds in foods. Most of our clients are eating a really clean diet and they're not being exposed to a ton of mold in food. The bigger elephant in the room is water damage buildings. And that can happen lots of ways. This is just like a short list. There's so many ways that water could intrude in our home, whether it's just unmanaged humidity, a leak behind the wall you don't know about, a storm, your gutters are clogged, all sorts of things. So, like I mentioned, the idea that having mold is a rarity is not true. I think I used to hear a lot of people say, "Oh, then 1 in 4 homes have water damage, or 1 in 4 homes had mold, or something like that." I don't quite know where people get that statistic, but if you think about the life of a building, any building, is it going to have water damage in its lifetime? Yeah. I mean, what are the odds that it wouldn't, right? How many of us have had, a bathtub overrun, or, just any number of things, a window leak? It's just really common. Especially this 98% here was about basements. I interviewed an inspector once, and he said 100% of crawl spaces he's visited are moldy. So this is one more like little study. This is just what was reported about office buildings, that they had known they have past water damage. They have a current issue, and where it was. And as I mentioned in the kind of teaser for this webinar, this issue is really on the rise as the climate changes. And, there's lots of different sources you can look to for this. I think this is a governmental source, just talking about like increasing insurance liability kind of risk that's going to be happening as climate is changing, and the projected, um, claims and damage that are going to be occurring. So, not to say that every water damage equals mold, it doesn't, or it doesn't have to, but it just does need to be addressed correctly, especially if you're living in a place that is more humid. This is on the right, a picture of like proper containment and an air scrubber. This is kind of an example of how remediation should look. Okay, myth number 2, maybe one that you don't believe, which is that we are healthy. I do think here in the United States, and we have some people from other countries too, but I do think we have this pride, which is fine in our country. But if we look at our real state of our health, it's pretty bad. It's really declining. The rates of chronic disease are really, really high. They're also increasing. This is a lot of stuff you find online is state by state, so it could be interesting if you want to look up your own state. 62% of adults in Montana, have at least one chronic disease. Two in five, 38% have two or more chronic diseases. So some of the top chronic diseases are things like kidney disease, lung disease, heart disease, um, Alzheimer's, diabetes, stroke. And the list changes a little bit depending on, which organization you're with. But we don't think of these things as being related to mold, and honestly, they could be. So, yes, we have a deficient diet here, and, a lack of exercise, and there's other factors. But even something like heart disease and stroke can be related to mold because of the inflammation. Kidneys, it's like many mycotoxins are nephrotoxic, so they're toxic to the kidneys, can be related to cancers, can be related to Alzheimer's, they can penetrate into the brain. So mold absolutely can be contributing to chronic disease, and it's not being talked about in a mainstream way. So I have put this on our own internal newsletter, just some different links about different diseases. There's so many different resources you can find linking mold to different diseases. So I'm sharing a few. This is mycotoxins and affecting the gut lining, and that breaking this tight junctions can result in translocation of luminal antigens and pathogens, and an excessive activation of the immune system. So before I found out I had mold, I found out I had a tiny bit of thyroid antibodies because I was in mold a really long time, and my gut was being affected even though I was working really hard to eat well and everything. And so I was starting, and then you can say in the chat if you like. I mean, many people develop autoimmunity around mold. Again, I mentioned like you can look up state by state, and it's kind of interesting to see, what different diseases are more prevalent in certain states. One reason or way that mold could be contributing to chronic diseases is colonizing um, in the nose, which we'll talk about just a little bit briefly on this presentation. And this is an article about if you have a pre-existing dysregulation of the immune system, that mold is like really going to exacerbate that existing issue. This is a more positive study showing that curcumin can be helpful in balancing out some of the toxicity and oxidation from a mycotoxin. Okay, number 3. I'm sure you've heard about this one, the dreaded gene. I think that Dave Asprey kind of coined that term from what I know, and it is a genetic aspect that can contribute to chronic illness and inflammation, but it's certainly not the only type of person who's going to get sick. So they say like 25% of us have this dreaded gene. Does that mean this other 75% are good to go in a moldy home? Absolutely not. I personally don't ask my clients to test for this gene, the HLA-DR gene, because it's expensive and it's not going to really change what I do. You may want to think about it to really be careful to avoid future exposures, but it's not going to really change how I treat. So other factors that can be involved are age, stress, how long have you been in mold, how severe is the mold. You've probably heard of on the right here the bucket theory that there's only so much your body can take before it starts to, go offline, so to speak, and become more symptomatic. So not only are you dealing with mold in a home, but you're dealing with EMF and maybe VOCs from, carpets and paints. And if there's water damage, there can be yeast and bacteria. So anyone can get sick, really. And, some people don't get sick. Yeah, my son is an example. He was living in a room with giant mold colony under his bed, and he never got sick, actually. It's crazy. So, I think that is his youth was working for him, but there are actually infants who get very sick and even die from mold exposure because their bodies, can't handle it when they're, just so tender. So some other groups of people who could be sensitive to mold, if you already have respiratory issues, immune issues, if you're going through cancer treatment, again, infants, school children, especially if there's mold in the school. If you're working from home, then you could be more, exposed if you're in an office where there's poor air quality. And women may be more prone to autoimmune disease and mold illness because of some of the ways that our bodies handle inflammation and our immune systems respond. So this is the HLA-DR gene that I mentioned briefly, and it can be, especially when it's turned on, so to speak, a marker that you're more prone to autoimmune or inflammatory diseases. But again, it's not the only one. Here's just a few other genes that are related to glutathione and detox. So, depending on your genetics, you could be just a better detoxer than the next person, or a worse detoxer than the next person. Okay, myth number 4 is like you just have to get rid of the mold and then you're good to go. So mold spores are one thing. You can visually see a colony of mold, but you can't see the individual spores. They're very tiny. They become airborne. And then even smaller than them are mycotoxins, which are just chemicals that the mold gives off. And they're just metabolites, but they are chemicals. They're not living things, so they can't be killed. And they may degrade over time, but they have to be transformed or moved out for you to not be exposed to them anymore. So mold needs moisture and a food source to grow, but mycotoxins are just shedding off of them. So here's a little bit more to that point, and there's some statistics on the right about the size of mycotoxins, spores, and then spore fragments are really common too. So it's like a broken piece of spore. And often the mycotoxins are like traveling around attached to spore fragments, and then they're just going to land like in your sofa, in the fan of your computer, all sorts of places, and just stay there. And if there's this food source, like if they land in a book and there's humidity, they could be actually growing there. So, probably the biggest mistake I see people make is not understanding this mycotoxin issue and bringing too many belongings with them. That's the biggest thing I see, or not getting rid of belongings. I just found this little quote while I was researching the other night, and it said that like a sick building, a moldy building could have up to 1 billion spores per cubic meter of air. It's so gross to think about. Okay, myth number 5, mycotoxin testing and treatment is A plus B equals C. This might be one of my biggest pet peeves here. So, what I mean by this is what I really see now is people saying, well, I ran a test of my home or my urine and I have this kind of mold. So, I have to take this kind of binder, and that's the full story. It's not the full story. I'm gonna break it down for you in quite a few slides here. So, one mold species may produce many different mycotoxins, and several species may produce the same mycotoxin. So, already it's not a one to one, right? Many mycotoxins are being produced. Furthermore, the production of mycotoxins varies with environmental conditions. So, if a colony is, you know, drying out or growing or whatever, they're going to produce different mycotoxins at that point in time. It's not like a consistent thing. Also, says, well, it's necessary to understand the pharmacological effect of various fungal compounds in isolation. Exposure normally occurs in concert, right? So you're not just getting one kind of fungus, you're getting multiple kinds. And that is creating a different result than just one fungus. And we talked about VOCs in the home, bacteria, yeast. It's just a big mess. So it's not affecting your health in this super linear way. Here's something I found. I think I found this last fall, and it really blew my mind. New mycotoxins are still being discovered, and as mycotoxins like break down, there could be like another layer of mycotoxins that are produced that we haven't even really identified yet. We don't even have a method to analyze yet. So this is why we cannot oversimplify what we see on our results. I think the way we test and what we know about mold and mycotoxins now versus 20 years from now is going to be very different. So just like don't hang your hat on one test you ran, and just know, okay, there's been an exposure and maybe this is where it came from, or that's where it came from. These are my symptoms. Hopefully you get some other testing like gut testing, hormone testing, and you take it all together in making the plan. You don't just go, well, I have aspergillus, so I'm using this binder. It's fine. You can do that as part of your plan, but it shouldn't be the whole plan. Several hundred mycotoxins have been identified. And are those all getting tested in your urine? No, just a handful. So here's what Vibrant Wellness tests, and I think they test the most of the 3 tests that are available to us right now. And why they pick certain ones or whatever, I don't totally know. I will also tell you that they are not testing the mycotoxin. They are testing a metabolite of the mycotoxin, right? So when you produce urine, that's a waste. And what's coming out in your urine has already been processed by your liver. and now again through your kidney, and it's coming out as a water-soluble toxin. So different toxins are going out through your stool and other ones are coming out through your kidney. So what they're actually testing is a metabolite of a mycotoxin that your body processed. So you can again see to like assume what kind of mold you have is a maybe, but it's just not. It's almost like it's not the main goal, right? And I think the way the test results come in sometimes is to simplify it for you and say, okay, you must have this type of, this suggests you have this type of mold. But that's not, necessarily the right point. I think they're just trying to make it more consumer friendly when you read it. This is a test from real time. It's just like a sample result. I don't love their test results. They are not consumer friendly. They are just like, is it present or not present? And it's not my favorite as far as reading the test results. But this is how they test and like the types that they test. And this is a graphic from Mosaic Labs. And here they're grouping the mycotoxins in terms of how you may be getting symptoms. So you can see, for example, alpha toxin M1 is in almost every category except kidney toxic and neurotoxic. But they're just showing if you have this mycotoxin present, you may be having symptoms in these body systems, right? So they just grouped it a little different way. And then some mycotoxins like the citrinin are really from many, many species, so you can't break it down very well. Here's a little just example of what mycotoxins look like. They're compounds, they're structures. So when you use something like an enzyme or essential oil type product, it's basically changing this chemical structure to into a structure that's like not dangerous anymore. So it's being transformed. So this is just kind of summarizing what I said earlier that it's our urine test is great. I think it's pretty accurate, but it's just a snapshot, a 1-day test, right? And that can go up and down. Maybe you're pushing out more toxins because you're detoxing more, you've moved out, and now you're seeing more come out. Well, that's because you're moving out some of the stored ones. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. Eventually, it should even out for you. But sometimes I don't like people to test too quickly because it might look like it got worse. Okay, and another thing to consider is colonization. And also when you run a urine test and urine, mycotoxins show up, you don't know when you're exposed, how you're exposed, if you're colonized. It doesn't tell you that piece of information. So again, instead of being too simplified, be a little broader. Think about the foundations of health and are those in place? Are you getting a good night's sleep? Are you having a bowel movement? Are you planning on moving? Are you getting rid of items? Are you ready to detox? If so, you can move lymph, you can use binders. And then you can do this all along, but especially in the long run, really restoring body systems that have taken a big hit. I feel like I spent a year or two after I moved to Arizona um, just working on infections. My immune system was down, my hormone levels were really down. It was a bit discouraging because I was really out of mold, but now my body had a lot of work to do to repair itself. And I, sometimes didn't feel good during that time. Myth number 6, only binders get rid of mycotoxins. So this one is kind of related, but just to say that there's lots of things actually helping you get rid of mycotoxins besides just binders. Binders just do one particular job. I have on the left here, just doesn't quite fit here, but I just had it some ways in the environment that mycotoxins can be transformed. Just some examples. And in the body, there's a lot going on to break down mycotoxins in your digestive tract, your liver, your immune system, antioxidants, different detox treatments you can use. So I have some clients who were always too sensitive for binders and they still got better. So you don't get hung up on that one aspect. Here's just a little picture of the liver and the phases of detox. And you can see here you need quite a lot of nutrients for your liver to be happy. So if you're thinking about liver detox, take your B vitamins twice a day instead of just once a day. Take vitamin C a few times a day. Be having garlic and onions and eggs if you can tolerate those things. Take glutathione or do coffee enemas. Eat plenty of protein because your liver needs the amino acids. This is just a little bit of examples of what happens or how the body breaks down certain mycotoxins. So we have another one of these coming up, but when the body receives a certain type of mycotoxin, it tries to break it down or neutralize it through whatever pathway is best for that mycotoxin. And there's different pathways that it can go down. So here, for example, zeaxanthin. No, I don't know if I pronounced that right. It's funny because I never have to say these out loud. But it goes through the liver reductive phase 1, followed by phase 2 conjugations, resulting in a lot of metabolites, right? So the lab is sort of picking what metabolites, I guess. I know there's one called ZEL that's one of the metabolites. It's sort of picking which ones to measure in your urine. Oh, there's the ZEL one. So this is showing some activity of neutralizing mycotoxins in the intestinal mucosa, if you still have that going on. And this article was also about like bile, and we'll talk about more about that. This is pretty cool too. So it's showing that lactobacillus, which is a really common strain of probiotic, can bind aflatoxins. Saccharomyces, which is like a beneficial yeast, can bind to mycotoxins, alpha toxins in particular. Saccharomyces boulardii, you may have heard of. It's usually really gentle. So Aspergillus and Fusarium are a couple of molds related to that. And then it's talking more about some of the mycotoxins that it can hit. So here's a great example of like if you're so focused on binders and maybe you don't tolerate them well, maybe Saccharomyces boulardii could be an option for you that's gentle, and look at all the different things it binds. So this is one reason that we talk about binder cycling in our course. And then fiber. I highlighted this whole part because prebiotics, which are usually just basically fibers, can bind to citrinin, which is that mold mycotoxin I mentioned earlier associated with a lot of molds. So lots of options out there. It's actually really exciting how many options we have. This is a little hard to read perhaps, but it's talking about specific mycotoxins and which pathways they go through and supplements and foods that can benefit it. So cruciferous vegetables, turmeric, berries, pomegranate, walnut. I feel honestly that I was able to hang in there for so long when I had mold because I cleaned up my diet so well. I ate nothing but like fresh food, homemade food. I eat a salad every day. Like I had a bowel movement every day. Like it can make a big difference. So if you're sensitive to supplements, you're on a limited budget. We all have to eat. So just think about foods. This is from Neil Nathan's website. You can see on the bottom if you want to look it up more. This is also why I'm a big fan of broccoli seed and sprout, because it's beneficial to this liver detox cycle and mycotoxin detox. Foods can work as binders, especially steamed greens. So this is an article about it. So some of these slides I pulled from our actual training course. I was just thinking because I ate steamed cabbage today at lunch and I love it, maybe because I'm Irish. So just cooking greens and eating them is a nice, simple way. Our coach Micki often just starts people on cooked greens rather than a binder. Here's another chart. This is from Mosaic about some of the binders that you may know, like charcoal and humic acid, and like what particularly they bind to. There's other charts out there, but this is just one little one. You can see probiotics are binding to quite a few. So binders, at the core are there to trap toxins in the colon and especially to prevent toxin reabsorption as bile salts are recycled. So this is why when you detox, you want to be making sure you have bowel movements so that toxins don't reabsorb. And binders are basically often binding to actual toxins in the stool or the bile that's in the stool that can be reabsorbed. And instead of being reabsorbed, it's bound in the stool and pooped out, basically. I know some binders claim to work at the cellular level through carbon or something. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how much resource, how it's a different, it would be a different mechanism, I would think, if it's at that level. Maybe it is trapping or replacing toxins at the cellular level in a different way. But in particular, here we're talking about in the colon. So this is our binder, and it has some elements that we're going to talk about in a second. So it has a variety of binders to bind to a variety of mycotoxins, and then it has a bile mover and a bowel mover too. I'll tell you why in a minute. So binders aren't like a perfect jail that toxins get put into. They're more of like a clingy thing. And this is sometimes why people feel worse on binders, because your body could still be kind of feeling the toxin come through, so to speak. And binders are often constipating, which is a real shame because it's exactly when you want a bowel movement. So if that toxin is kind of hanging around in there, you could feel worse as well. So again, yeah, you need to be making sure there's bowel movements. So that's why we put some ingredients for that in our toxin binder, because many of our clients are constipated. If you're not constipated and you have loose stool, I don't recommend you take our binder. I actually only recommend you take our binder at night to help you have a bowel movement like overnight. And then if you don't have bile that moves well, then the binders coming in and binding to the bile isn't going to work as well. So we have some bile mover in our formula, like artichoke. Things that also move the bile are like bitters, which are mentioned here. So things are, not always so simple, right? You have to kind of look at how each individual is able to detox. And just a reminder that it's not all in the colon, it's also potentially in the sinuses and the brain, and we really have to consider all the body systems. This is a little treatment for sinuses. Okay, moving on to home remediation and testing. I'm really an advocate that every mold coach, every mold practitioner should know somewhat decent about the home, because your clients are going to have questions. And if you're just giving advice like shoot from the hip, like blah, 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 you didn't really look it up, you're just saying whatever, you might be saying the wrong thing. So this is a big part of our course. I think it's 25% of the course is talking about the home environment, because it's important. It's an environmental disease. If you don't understand the environmental part, you're not as helpful. So this is my actual home when we had our siding redone because we had moisture under the siding. You'll see more of later. Another thing you can consider if you're thinking of getting into the field is actually specializing in the home side. And this doesn't mean that you go around and do inspections necessarily unless you want to. It could just be helping people like sort through results they've gotten, inspections they've had, making decisions, that kind of a thing. It's really a big need. So another myth I think a lot of practitioners say are like, oh, you might have mold, like just run an ERMI test of your house. First of all, ERMI was not invented for this kind of residential use. So it's a difficult test to read. You need some special interpretation of it. I would prefer you also get a mycotoxin test along with just an ERMI test, which is more for spores. So I would prefer more testing. And then you have to know that a dust test or an air test or whatever is just not enough if you're, especially if you're a homeowner. If you're a renter and you run some kind of DIY test and it's very high for mold, now you know to get out. I really wouldn't recommend you stay and flush it out with your landlord. I would report it, but I really wouldn't stay. If you're the homeowner, you're in a little different situation. And now you need to know where that mold came from. And just like with the urine test, a dust test is not going to tell you where it came from unless you test it only right there in a certain spot, which is not really how a dust test works. You could do a tap test to test one spot with a sticky plate, but the dust test is meant for the whole house usually. You can break it up, but that's more expensive. So here again is our wet, rotten wood under our siding. And I think this isn't outside my son's bedroom. We're gonna get more into all this, but the biggest things I see people doing wrong, so to speak, with knowing they have mold is bringing belongings with them, refusing to move, and then like cross contaminating, like getting their car now contaminated and stuff like this. And I can relate. So over here on the right, I'm saying like you can't make a client do anything in this moment. And this is one thing I hear from some practitioners like, well, they won't work with me because I haven't moved. Well, there's a lot of circumstances that go on, and I'm a big fan of moving, um, but sometimes it's a little bit of a process to find the new place and da da da. So, um, you can be honest, you can give them your best advice. There's tests and homes I've looked at and I'm like, "Doesn't sound too bad to me." And then there's situations where I'm like, "Oh my god, like, why are you still there?" Maybe I don't say it like that, but there's some things that are shocking that people, are still living in. And then there's some things that people are really worried because they wanna move into this place, but they're worried about this one little thing, and it's really actually not that bad. So I just try to be honest from my perspective and what information they're giving me. And then I just encourage them to kind of like find their center, use their own resources to make decisions, look at options because it's really their own journey, right? It's not yours as the practitioners. It's theirs to figure out and you to just kind of keep encouraging. So we have a lot of information in the course about how to look for mold on your own and some of the resources and areas. These are some signs that there's been water damage, right? So it's not always visible mold. It could be this bubbled up paint, cracked paint. This is a hygrometer, which measures humidity. So it's a good thing to have like in your basement or different rooms of the house, and you want to keep it below 50%. If you're looking for inspectors or how to find someone qualified, we teach about that as well. These are some comparisons of testing methods. So there's a lot to it, right? Uh, this is just a little bit for fun, but many landlords will just want to bleach out an area and paint over it, which is not proper remediation. Remediation is a detailed step by step process where you remove the contaminated materials like floorboard, carpet, etc., while you're, walling off, containing the area. There's cleaning steps, there's fogging steps. So it's a complicated thing. So the issue with bleach that gets talked about a lot is really because the water in bleach can encourage mold to grow. There are ingredients in bleach that can kill mold, but it's not you don't just pour bleach down the cavity of a wall and call it good. And this is just some of our training about, hiring a good remediator. Um, yeah, so I just have a little on that's kind of wraps up the home section. Oops, this slide got a little cut off. Um, but yeah, you can see that this is a complex topic, but that doesn't mean that we can't make sense of it, right? And I think Micki and I just feel really passionate about creating more practitioners to help more people. There really aren't that many mold trainings out there, especially that are really like accessible. Um, so last fall, we graduated our first group of students. Here's a few of them who shared photos for us. It was really fun. So starting in April is our second group. And again, this can be open to anyone. We did have some people take it last time who were just there for their own learning. But we probably had more people who were already practitioners and wanted to add in mold, or were doing mold but didn't feel 100% confident. And then we had some people, and these might be my favorite, so to speak, who are really just starting into this health world and they want to be a mold coach based on what they experience. They don't really have experience health coaching or anything like that, but they just have the calling. I think that's really beautiful. And that may be some of you on here. So we have a couple quotes from our students. It was a really good experience all around. I'm not going to get into it too deeply here, but this is the format. It's an 8-week course. We do give it live, so we have a long slide presentation and handouts, and then a long Q&A session. This year, we added transcripts. We have a certification. We now have started a directory. I feel like people feel the most stuck on but what do I do with a real case? So I'm adding a call for just case studies this time around. And just briefly, here's the 8 lessons and what we cover. I think some of the things that are important that don't get talked about a lot are dealing with mold colonization, dealing with mast cell, dealing with really sensitive people, all the home stuff that there's so much confusion around. We go over different tests, also some tests about blood tests and gut tests, just so you're familiar. Opening up drainage pathways, moving bile, all the binders, options out there. And then treating related symptoms, like if a person's having anxiety, is gaining weight, how do you deal with different things they're going through? And then getting them to better, right? So there's stages of healing where someone's in the most acute stage, so they're starting to get better, till now they're just maintaining. Which sometimes it feels like you'll never get there, but you can. I'm there, and I have other clients there. Maybe you have to be careful where they go or certain things they do or eat, but they're better. And we do have a lot of bonuses on the course too. We're really lucky to have some of our partners giving trainings and test kits and stuff like that. So I can put the link in the chat in a minute here, but this is a QR code if you want to go to the link, or the link's written here on the right. The link is also underneath the YouTube video. And for this first early launch in March, we have a coupon code. It's called Early Bird, and it's through next Tuesday for $100 off. We also have a 2-payment plan option. I tried to have a 3-payment plan option, but we couldn't get it to work on our website. So we have a 2-payment plan option for the course as well. So I think that's it. One sec. I'll just take some questions in a second here. Okay. Okay, so I put the link in the chat. But Nanette, there's a lot of different ways to get to work on the sinuses. We sell a silver spray, and you can use that alone 3 times a day for 2 months. You can also put biocidin in it. I have right here this kit from CitraSafe. It's a nasal mold kit I haven't put together yet, but you make it like they send you all the components and you put it together at home, which is kind of cool. We mentioned the time inhalation earlier. So there's lots of different potential options for the sinuses, and there's testing options too. Stacy or Stace. Yeah, so as soon as we get off, the replay will just be at the same YouTube link if you got here late. And if you want to share it with a friend, that's awesome. I appreciate it. Yeah, and it's crazy. Like colonization can happen for a long time. Um, and there's even speculation that it can colonize like bone or like deeper tissue. It definitely can like I don't know if it can colonize the lung, but also just sort of continue to irritate the lung. I think that's something I was dealing with for a lot of years after. I just recently had some glutathione nebulized, and that was amazing. It helped me so much. I wish I had done that a long time ago because I think my lungs just were still irritated from being in mold so long. And then when it would be allergy season, my lungs would react, my bronchioles would react, and I'd kind of close up. So some of those tissues, like later, need to be repaired, and like biofilms in the gut, infections in the gut. Um, the sinuses can be really slow to clean out. So you can also do saline washes. I mean, when I was sick, I was saline washing my nose twice a day. And I didn't even know much stuff about mold. I just know it felt good to me to do that. So that can just flush it. But some other like herbal products can more help for killing. You can also get from a mold trained MD an antibiotic like saline thing for the nose. So some practitioners are doing that. Often the sinuses is like a later step in your healing because you won't have like the capacity, the immune capacity to really heal that area. Like if you're still in mold, are you really going to heal your sinuses? No. If your immune system's still like really weak. So it can take like it can be a later stage to get the nose cleaned up, but it sounds like you were in mold a long time ago. So time to clean that nose up. Yeah, it's crazy how long it can last. Yeah, dust. I'm still sensitive to dust. And yeah, I mean, dust is so gross. There's so much nasty stuff in dust. So, um, okay, I don't see too many other questions. You guys are quiet. Any other questions before we head off? But thank you so much for being on here. Hi, Marcel from New Zealand. Lots of mold there. Yes, it's very wet, right? So let's see. I guess this is like your fall, right? I have a good practitioner friend in New Zealand. Um, I would love to visit still, in spite of your mold. It looks really beautiful. Um, yeah, and we actually have not had an international student yet in our course, but I would love to because again, a lot of this information can be applied, even if I know New Zealand is pretty strict, right, about selling supplements and you don't have access to everything. But there's always options. Like where there's a will, there's a way. And yeah, I think that's one of our specialties is like we have a lot of options. So I'm always wary of practitioners who are like, this is the only way. Well, that way might be too intense for certain people or just not accessible to certain people. So it's good to have options. I'm a big fan. We didn't really cover it on this presentation. I'm a big fan of detox techniques. They can be very affordable. Just getting that movement in the body is really helpful for detoxification. Um, Stacy, I don't know if I'm saying your name right, but why are functional MDs limited in their understanding of mold? I mean, I think it's just a very deep topic. So it's hard. Like I did a course with Laura Adler, who gives a bonus for this course in like toxicants, right? Like if you want to tell a client how to pick out a safe pan or how to pick out the best water filter or stuff like that, like it takes a lot of research to really answer those questions intelligently, which is why I took her course, because she's already done all that research. So I took it because if someone came to me and said, "How do I know like which fish is safe to eat and which is the most toxic?" Like it's like I've heard little things, but I hadn't studied it in depth. So I just think this topic is very difficult, not impossible, but difficult, and it takes time. So we had a two pharmacists in our last course, and that was really awesome. If there's an interest, and these are people often like looking to change their practice style. It's hard as a practitioner if you're very busy to put in a bunch of extra hours to research. There aren't many like professional courses out there teaching mold. It's difficult for me to get continuing ed for those folks because I'm not an MD, so I can't apply for continuing ed for them. So yeah, I think I remember, I'll tell myself, like when Dave Asprey came out with his moldy movie many years ago, I wasn't aware I had mold yet. I was a busy acupuncturist. I owned a clinic. And I remember like, oh, I don't really have time to watch that. Like, I'm so busy and mold is so rare. And I wish I would have watched it, right? It probably would have saved me. I found out about mold not long later, probably within the year. But, I just think it's like time, right? Just like most MDs don't know a lot about, most conventional MDs don't know much about, I don't know, nutrition or toxins or what have you. Like, they're just working. And unless they change their model drastically, they really don't have time to look into all these other things. So, yeah, but I know I have a client who is in Portland and her MD is really mold knowledgeable. I just talked to someone in California and their practitioner is mold knowledgeable, a little bit more like old school in some of what they do, like with blood testing and stuff, but trying to utilize insurance to help the client. And that's fantastic. Yeah, it is frustrating, and that's why we're training, right? So we graduated 23 people last time. So I just hope we graduate more and more, and then they can spread the word and be teaching in their own way too. So yeah, hopefully it's definitely growing. Yeah, Val is saying she's sharing that she's had a lot of sleep issues and brain issues from mold. Yeah, definitely sounds familiar. Jasmine, yeah, after a new mold exposure, you can definitely take binders. You can rinse out your nose. You can take a shower. You want to get those clothes off and you want to wash for sure. You might want to do like a coffee enema, but usually for me to like calm me down, I'll do binders. Sometimes I'll do like antihistamines if I feel like I'm in a histamine type flare up. Um, what else? Antioxidants, fish oil, just sort of anti-inflammatory things to kind of calm it down. Rebot maybe in the fall. So nobody really probably wants to study mold in the summer. So we'll take the summer off and we'll do it again in the fall, probably like maybe October, November, September, October, something like that. All right. Well, thanks you so much for being on. I was excited to share this with you, kind of new webinar for me. And you'll get like a follow-up email with a recording and the coupon code and the course. And yeah, if it's not for you right now or in this moment, like just stash it away or share it with a friend. I can tell like it's just only our second time, so it's kind of catching awareness, and I just hope to keep growing it over time. So thanks for everyone for being here and having your interest, and I will be in touch. Bye, everybody.